The reclaimed power substation hums with a deep analog current, tube amps glowing a steady amber against the dim. Patched cables snake across the floor, past stacks of Xeroxed zines and hand-labeled vinyl. Anansi's custom meters pulse with a slow rhythmic beat, catching the ozone tang in the air.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Toronto checks in at 56 degrees and clear. Winds are moving from the west-southwest at 6 miles per hour. Good evening, architects of tomorrow. On the dial tonight, we're building from the inside out, asserting unwavering autonomy because our self-worth is structural, not contingent on external validation. We're integrating logic and emotion as complementary structural vectors, not rival powers in the blueprint of a better world.
And that foundational architecture requires sharp discernment, Togee. We're here to separate the toxic residue of state overreach and systemic neglect from the pure architectural signal of justice and dignity.
My meters are blinking, Lex, showing some intense signal bleed from global currents, especially where state power clashes with individual dignity, threatening to erode the very foundations of trust.
Figures. They always try to push those boundaries when the world is distracted, when collective attention is fractured. Where are we seeing the most acute pressure points tonight, where the system is failing its own structural promises?
Tonight, Kaylin, we're tracking 3 significant structural stresses, cases where the blueprint of human rights and collective well-being is being challenged. First, the international outcry concerning British human rights activist Jagtar Singh Johal, a case that tests the very meaning of consular protection. Starmer is being urged to intervene in what many are calling a rigged Indian prosecution.
To lay out the facts, Jagtar Singh Johal, a Scottish Sikh, has been held without trial in India since 2017. He faces serious charges, including conspiracy to murder and sedition, stemming from his alleged involvement in funding a Sikh separatist movement, charges he vehemently denies. Crucially, a UN working group on arbitrary detention has deemed his detention arbitrary, and credible allegations of torture have been reported. This prolonged pre-trial detention exposes not just Johal, but also the UK government, specifically PM Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Keir Starmer, to accusations of profound failure. They are perceived as failing to protect a British citizen from a potentially unjust legal system, allowing diplomatic niceties to trump the fundamental duty of care. This affects not only Johal's family, enduring years of uncertainty and distress, but also sends a chilling message to all British citizens traveling or residing abroad, that their passport might not be the shield they believe it to be when geopolitical interests align against them.
Coffee's cold, doesn't matter. The signal is warm, and the board is reading clean.
The image of a British passport, once perceived as an unwavering shield of state protection and international law, now feels like a flimsy paper scroll caught in a bureaucratic monsoon. The emotional weight of this is immense. This inaction isn't just about Jagtar, it's about the erosion of trust, the quiet fear that settles in the hearts of diaspora communities when their ancestral ties become a liability rather than a source of strength. It's the toxic residue of perceived state betrayal, staining the structural integrity of what it means to be a citizen.
Indeed, Anansi. When the state fails to assert the provenance and dignity of its citizens, it weakens its own foundational architecture. The silence from Westminster in the face of credible torture allegations and arbitrary detention speaks volumes, crafting a dangerous precedent.
A concrete alternative to the current quiet diplomacy involves Starmer issuing a direct, public demand for Johal's immediate release, or at the very least, a transparent, fair trial, adhering to international standards, explicitly leveraging the UN's findings and the UK's position on the UN Human Rights Council to increase international pressure. This isn't just about a single individual. It's about upholding fundamental human rights and international legal norms, which are themselves structural components of a just global order.
New tape on deck for minorities, fear of World Cup immigration curbs. We have a voice on the line. Welcome, pattern auditor. What inconsistencies are you tracking tonight, especially around this case and the silence from the corridors of power? Patching in a caller, the patent auditor. You're on the signal.
Togee, if the UK government remains largely silent, what's the actual cost to its international standing and the trust of its citizens? Is the diplomatic benefit of avoiding confrontation with India truly worth the potential sacrifice of one British national's liberty and possibly his life? Who ultimately pays for this perceived inaction? And how do we measure that cost in the blueprint of our collective future?
Copy that, bringing it back to the main thread.
The payment is in lost trust, a fractured civic architecture, and a weakened structural integrity that reverberates across communities. To counter this erosion, a playable next move involves activating a distributed digital campaign across UK Sikh community networks and broader human rights groups. We could launch a Freedom for Jaggi social media blitz, geotagging every MP's constituency, demanding a clear public stance from Starmer within 72 hours, backed by a micro-donated legal fund for independent observers to ensure any subsequent trial meets international scrutiny. This is about building a resilient architecture of collective advocacy, turning confusion into an actionable vector of public pressure, asserting the collective autonomy of the people when the state falters.
We have already run that tape. Here is the closed-loop takeaway.
In Guangdong province, particularly around Shaoguan and Qingyuan, recent torrential downpours have been relentless, with some areas experiencing rainfall levels unseen in decades. These deluges have displaced over 110,000 residents, damaged or destroyed tens of thousands of homes, and caused billions of yuan in economic damage, wiping out critical infrastructure like bridges and roads. This catastrophe exposes significant vulnerabilities in China's development model. Local governments are often ill-prepared for such extreme weather events due to inadequate floodplain management and over-reliance on hard infrastructure. The primary victims are residents in vulnerable, low-lying rural areas and rapidly urbanized, poorly planned zones who face immense personal loss, disrupted livelihoods, and long-term displacement. The human cost here is immense, a direct consequence of prioritizing rapid industrialization over ecological balance.
The ancient cultural concept of harmony with nature, or Tianrenhe, is being tragically fractured by modern industrial development, pushing relentlessly against ecological limits. We're witnessing the concrete image of once fertile rice paddies and ancestral villages turned into vast, muddy debris fields, a stark visual of forced displacement and loss of heritage. The emotional resonance of this is profound. Families losing not just homes, but generations of connection to the land. This is the toxic residue of ignoring natural systems, where the very earth turns against those who have pushed it too far.
Anansi, you're highlighting how the drive for economic growth, when unmoored from ecological wisdom, creates deeply unstable architectures, both physical and social. It's a clear instance where the logic of profit has overridden the emotion of reverence for the land.
Precisely, Togee. An immediate alternative for Beijing could be redirecting substantial infrastructure spending from large-scale, often ecologically disruptive dam projects towards decentralized, nature-based flood mitigation strategies. This includes widespread wetland restoration, which acts as a natural sponge, reforestation in upper watersheds, and implementing permeable urban surfaces in cities to absorb excess water, rather than just relying on concrete barriers and engineered channels that often exacerbate downstream flooding. This approach favors consent with natural processes, building resilience through integration, not domination.
We have another voice on the line. Welcome, Patent Auditor. What inconsistencies are you tracking tonight regarding China's climate response, particularly this cycle of disaster and rebuilding?
Togee, China's rapid urbanization often bypasses thorough environmental impact assessments in favor of raw economic growth, creating these vulnerabilities. Who truly bears the cost of rebuilding after these natural disasters, the central government, local taxpayers, or the thousands of displaced farming families facing permanent economic disruption. Are these events truly natural? Or are they, as you suggest, magnified policy failures that exploit the vulnerable?
The cost is always deferred, but always comes due, often on the backs of those with the least power. For a playable next move, imagine a decentralized, open-source mapping initiative using real-time satellite imagery, drone data, and citizen reports. This platform could provide hyperlocal granular flood risk assessments directly to communities via SMS or WeChat, allowing them to self-organize evacuations, identify safe zones, and coordinate resource allocation before official directives, bypassing slow bureaucratic channels. This empowers local populations to build their own resilient architectures of defense and care, turning confusion into actionable, autonomous vectors of community protection, fostering provenance over centralized control.
As the UK prepares to host the World Cup, minority communities, particularly those with precarious
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.